It probably was the first of the real super yachts.
A workplace for 250 sailors.
We had a policy of unobtrusive excellence, and everybody was dedicated to doing that.
And one extraordinary family's home from home.
This was the one place that all of the royals said they felt most relaxed, especially Her Majesty.
I'm Rob Bell, and in this programme I'll learn about the extraordinary life of this iconic vessel. I'll recount its controversies and heroics.
The Royal Yacht Britannia saved my life and hundreds of others.
I'll reveal an incredible secret that's been hidden until now.
Her Majesty's Yacht Britannia would be given the authority of central government in the advent of government in London being completely wiped out.
And remember its last days as the sun finally set on the British Empire.
I saw her cry on that one day at the decommissioning paying off ceremony of Her Majesty's Yacht Britannia in Portsmouth.
This is the story of Her Majesty's Yacht Britannia.
Leith Docks in Edinburgh, final resting place of the world's most famous motor yacht. Preserved for the nation and literally frozen in time. On board, every clock is stuck at 1 minute past 3, the exact moment the Queen stepped off for the last time when, on December the 11th, 1997, the royal yacht was decommissioned. For the previous 44 years, Britannia had sailed every ocean, attracting huge crowds in every port. Hosting heads of states, diplomats and business leaders from around the globe. But whatever the location, Britannia always represented a little piece of home. For one woman at least.
In royal homes like Sandringham and Windsor, even Balmoral, it's difficult for the Queen to be really left on her own. But she once said of Britannia, it was the one place she could truly relax.
And it's easy to see why. So I'll be going on my own exclusive journey through the living spaces, the dining areas, the staff quarters, and the gleaming engine room, all with their fascinating secrets. During her lifetime, Britannia sailed more than 1 million miles. But how exactly did that life begin? The story starts in 1936, when the new king, Edward VIII, requested a royal yacht that would reflect the British Empire's prestige and importance. It was a far-sighted vision. But, like his reign, it was short-lived.
His former Majesty, King Edward VIII, did declare his irrevocable determination to renounce the throne for himself and his descendants.
The abdication crisis meant plans for a new royal yacht were shelved. It took another 2 years and a new king to revive them. George VI envisioned his royal yacht to be one with a difference.
In 1938, the Admiralty requested plans for a new royal yacht, which could also be used as a hospital ship as a secondary role.
And it was very much primary and secondary roles there, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But it's understandable given that in the late 1930s, the political climate in Europe was rapidly declining and war was beginning to seem increasingly inevitable.
And so the need for a hospital ship's what seemed more of a priority than the royal yacht.
One could say so. One could say so.
This dual function meant the idea was approved quickly. Ministers wanted a yacht that could travel fast enough to keep up with other Royal Naval craft and far enough to visit all the territories of the British Empire.
The Admiralty sent out for tenders in August 1939. The date by which the Admiralty required the tenders back was the 12th of September 1939, however.
Just 9 days before that deadline, on September the 3rd, everything changed.
France declare war on Germany.
The war signalled the beginning of 6 years of fighting. And a second false start for Britain's royal yacht.
In fact, it wasn't until 1950, 5 years after the war finally ended, that the idea for a new royal yacht resurfaced. And when it happened, there was a real sense of urgency about it.
That was because the King, George VI, had been diagnosed with lung cancer, and doctors hoped a convalescence cruise might help improve his condition. So the plans for a royal yacht that could again double as a hospital ship were reenacted. The task fell to Britain's biggest shipbuilding company, John Browns of Glasgow.
So how did John Browns go about ensuring a really speedy design and construction of the new royal vessel?
Well, shipyards tend to use what are known as reference ships when they've got any project that requires to be built in a hurry. A reference ship is a successful existing design. And it so happened that a few years before the Royal Yacht project came on the scene, John Browns had built two smallish ships called the Arnhem and the Amsterdam. And we can see images of them here.
All right. There are some similarities, aren't there? I mean, you've got the one funnel in the middle.
The hull form is very similar. The mid-body of the hull was pretty much identical to what was arrived at for the Britannia.
So what were these ships used for then?
Well, this may astonish you. They were actually overnight North Sea ferries. They were built for British Railways to operate between Harwich and the Hook of Holland.
You're telling me that the Royal Yacht Britannia is based very strongly on a passenger ferry?
Absolutely, yes.
Adapting a ferry for royal use did require a number of changes. The external gangways had to be lowered by 2 feet so crewmen couldn't look into the royal apartments. The yacht was given a clipper bow, whose height was increased by 2 feet to prevent water spray on deck. As it would need to accommodate a crew and royal household numbering over 250, the vessel could easily house 200 injured when converted into a hospital ship. And lastly, she needed 3 masts to allow her to fly the ensigns required by a royal vessel: the Royal Standard, the National, and the Admiralty flags.
I'm immediately drawn down here to the crew and the number of crew, but when you go to the top, there it is.
Royal party, only 4. It's effectively a palace or stately home at sea, isn't it?
On the 4th of February 1952, the John Brown shipyard received confirmation to start building this new palace at sea. Sadly, George VI never got to see it. Just 2 days later, the King finally succumbed to his long and serious illness. It would be his daughter, the new Queen Elizabeth, who would help create what would become one of the world's most famous vessels. Coming up, the legend is launched.
I name the ship Britannia. I wish success to her and to all who sail in her.
On succeeding to the throne, the young Queen Elizabeth took a keen interest in the new royal yacht, ensuring there was no delay in its construction. By April 1953, she unveiled what had, until then, been known only as Hull number 691.
Accompanied by the Duke, the Queen came to perform the launching of the new royal yacht, whose name until that hour had been kept a close secret.
I name the ship Britannia. I wish success to her and to all who sail in her.
From the outset, the royals were keen to avoid accusations of extravagance. Amidst post-war rationing, they chose a bottle of cheap Australian wine rather than champagne. The Queen involved herself in every detail of the vessel. She and Prince Philip had a special affinity with the ship from the very beginning. But then, it was unique.
Every other reign has seen a particular structure, a building, a castle, a palace, all sorts of things, memorials, if you like. We've never had anything with the Queen apart from the Royal Yacht Britannia, the only structure built during her reign.
When it came to fitting out the interiors, the young royal couple made sure everything was to their taste.
What is the Queen's style then?
Most people think, oh, the Queen goes around in a ermine cloak and a crown all day and nothing like that. She's nothing like that. She's a very simple folk. As she has said herself, she is an ordinary woman who finds herself in extraordinary circumstances. And she wanted sort of country house comfort, and she wanted it to be comfortable, simple, and fairly modest.
Along with simplicity, the royals also wanted quality. So they turned to one of Britain's best-known designers, Sir Hugh Casson, to help create what would become their floating home.
You look at these drawings now, and these were all done in 1949, 1950, 51, 52. All done, you know, long, just before the yacht was commissioned. And yet you go on the yacht today to visit, this is what you'll see. It's the same thing. They haven't been changed at all. The Queen hates change. If anybody wants to change a piece of furniture in any of the royal residences, even when she had in charge of the royal yacht, nobody was allowed to move a cushion or a pillow or a chair without her say-so. She hates change in that way.
And these drawings are very much testament to that.
Very much testament to it, yeah. You're absolutely right.
Tailoring a yacht to the owner's exact style, however modest, was something new. But it's what billionaire yacht owners of today still demand. Alan Foote, whose company refits super yachts, believes Britannia was a trendsetter.
It probably was the first of the real super yachts. The Royal Yacht is something very special. Her DNA really does run through all that the modern super yacht owner and designer are probably trying to achieve.
As with any yacht in this class, it was built for the comfort of a few, rather than the many.
It's little wonder that Britannia is often referred to as a ship of two halves. Behind me, there's the stern, where the state apartments and royal families' living quarters are. Those softly furnished, comfortable rooms we've just seen. And down here are the crew's quarters.
Britannia had 220 crewmen, known as yachties, plus 20 officers and a full Royal Marine band. All lived under service conditions. Today, it's an ex-yachtie, Harry Horn, who's showing me around.
So this is how the other half lived, is it?
This is the petty officers' mess bunk spaces.
So it's a little different to upstairs, isn't it, in the royal apartments?
We were very, very cramped.
So everyone would have a kind of, a space like this to store all your personal effects?
Yeah, this is actually the deluxe model.
What's deluxe about it?
This is twice the width for a Royal Marine than a yachtsman. So we would only have half of this.
You only have half that hanging space?
I mean, that's just a few inches.
Just a few inches for 2 white uniforms, 2 blue uniforms. You're there.
You wouldn't need an iron. They'd get pressed in there, wouldn't they?
They did.
With such cramped living quarters, it was important that there was space to relax.
This is our rec space. Our bunks are all off a bit. And this place could come alive on a Sunday. Everybody was first-name terms on board, apart from the officers, who were Sir. That was fine. But chiefs were known by their first name, as were the warrant officers, as were you. Yeah, we had good times, and we used to make sure that we had enough of everything when we went away to sea. Toilet paper was always a pressing issue in the fact that if I run out of toilet paper, it was a court-martial offence with no defence. So I used to make sure that I had enough for a 6-month trip if we were going away for 6 weeks, and any unoccupied cabin down aft that was used by the royal staff, if it wasn't in use, would be full of toilet paper. And
just so you had your derriere covered.
Absolutely, everybody's derriere covered.
So when the royals were on board, there were certain protocols for crew.
Certainly, yeah. Everybody would wear white gym shoes on the upper deck for 2 reasons. One is that they wouldn't mark the teak decks, and also that the noise of foot traffic over the royal apartments would be kept to a minimum. Yeah. Communication was kept to a very low voice, certainly no shouting, and during procedures such as dress ship, these commands could be taken out by waving flags. So the communications yeoman, when the first rope went onto the jetty, would lower a flag which he had in his right hand, just lower the flag, and that signal was to tell everybody to pull the flags up, to dress Britannia overall.
Wow, so communications on board, even amongst the crew here in really quite close quarters to each other?
Would be whispered or very quietly spoken. And hats were never worn on the upper deck aft of the funnel. That was the unwritten rule.
And what if you did kind of cross paths with a royal in your working duties?
One would just spring to attention and bow as Her Majesty or the Duke passed, and then carry on with your work. Speak when spoken to.
Did that ever happen with you?
Many times, yeah. The Duke would come up and have a natter or growl at you.
Did you ever get growled at?
I got growled at in 1985 when I was on an umbrella party in the West Indies, and it wasn't going to rain. And then just as the Rolls-Royce turned up, it rained. So I unfolded my umbrella and went to put it up over the Duke, and he growled at me. So I put it away.
Oh,
yes.
Good. That was enough, was it?
That was enough, yeah.
One deck down from the crew quarters in the bowels of the ship is one of the most praised and criticised components of Britannia. The engine room still houses the same machinery installed by John Brown and Company in 1953. I'm meeting up with an ex-engineer to tell me a little more about it. And like everything else aboard Britannia, it's gleaming.
Welcome to the engine room.
I think this has got to be the shiniest engine room I've ever seen.
I think that's undoubtedly true, and the nice thing about it is it actually worked as well, and it worked very, very well.
But it'd be run like this, would it? It would be kept this
all the
time, the whole time?
All the time like this, yeah. And it's normal, because we were part of the fleet, even the warships kept their engine rooms as polished as this.
This cleanliness didn't go unnoticed by VIP visitors.
But many famous people came down here, but one in particular, to my mind, was President Reagan came down here when it was running, so he saw it at its noisiest, hottest environment, and he was so impressed with the splendour of it that apparently he asked Her Majesty afterwards where the real engine room was, because he thought this was the show engine room and there was another one somewhere doing the work. It's amazing, it's amazing. And that made us all feel very proud, of course.
This labyrinth of pipes and gauges is the beating heart of Britannia. The two geared steam turbines, developing a total of 12,000 shaft horsepower, allowed the yacht to reach speeds of 22.5 knots. It is quite literally a shining example of British engineering. But ironically, it was the engine that led to one of Britannia's greatest controversies, one that developed into a full-blown PR crisis, both for the royal yacht and the royal family.
The operation and Britain's commitment to this task force had begun. And a not inconsiderable part of this departure was designed knowing these pictures would be shown on Argentine television tonight.
When Britain went to war with Argentina in 1982, the government put together a task force of more than 100 Royal Navy and merchant ships. The public expected Britannia to play her part, but she didn't.
There was a certain amount of criticism that it wasn't used during the Falklands crisis. It said, yeah, why don't we get Britannia down there? They could do with it. We certainly needed a hospital ship down there.
The problem was her age. Then nearly 30 years old, she was the last vessel in the Royal Naval Fleet that still ran on heavy fuel oil rather than diesel.
The difficulty was that it would have cost so much to have got her there, not just because she used a different type of fuel than the ships that were already in the area, so they would have had to have taken a special tanker down. I mean, we had the QE2 down there, as you probably know, but and that was all right, but you couldn't get Britannia. There was criticism, but it was unwarranted.
Deserved or not, it wouldn't be the last time Britannia was embroiled in controversy. And as ever, her supporters pointed to the other ways in which she served the country. Throughout her life, the royal yacht sailed more than 1 million miles, completing a full circumnavigation of the globe for every year of her service, where she was a regular venue for UK diplomatic and trade missions. Alongside the official duties, there were more private and intimate journeys. Britannia was a favourite haunt for royal honeymooners.
You had Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon, then you had Princess Anne and her first husband, Mark Phillips, and they got seasick throughout their entire honeymoon, so it wasn't very conducive to lovemaking or anything else, you know, on board that time. And then, of course, you had Charles and Diana and Andrew and Fergie, Sarah Ferguson. So the below decks nickname of the Royal Yacht Britannia as the Love Boat is something of a misnomer.
A misnomer, as all those royal romances ended in divorce. But when not on honeymoon duty, what was life on board like for the royals? I'm meeting an ex-Britannia steward who helped the royal household.
This is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
When Her Majesty's on board, William, what's the daily routine?
Daily routine, she would get a call around 6:30 to 7 in the morning by her personal maid, would take her coffee or a tea. The bath would then be run with a thermometer in the bath to get the correct temperature.
A thermometer to make sure it's
it would be in the
bang
bath,
on.
bang on. And once that bath is ready, Her Majesty would then go to the bathroom, and then the dresser would meet her to dress her ready for whatever the day was going to bring ahead of her.
What kind of time would the Queen then retire to bed?
She'd normally retire about 11 o'clock in the evening. Once Her Majesty's retired, then the rest of the guests then can make their way to their own rooms then. That's the protocol. When she's retired, everybody can retire.
One of the Queen's favourite areas of Britannia, a place where she could truly relax, was the Sun Lounge.
This is where Her Majesty the Queen would have breakfast with the Duke of Edinburgh. They would meet here about 8 o'clock in the morning, have a light breakfast just to get her through till sort of mid-morning for coffee.
Really quite informal, isn't it?
This is very informal. This is where also she'd perhaps come back and have tea late afternoon, about 5 o'clock. Beautiful wafer-thin sandwiches, cucumbers, salmon, beautiful scones, lovely cake stands, different types of tea, whichever she required.
So how formal or informal were certain members of the family with the crew on board Britannia?
Some members of the royal family just do not want to interact with the crew. They really didn't. They keep well away. But when we were on royal honeymoons, the honeymoon couple would always walk the ship to meet the crew. And we would interact very much so. But there's other members that just would not come and do that. It was... so you had to be aware that there was that little distance between us all.
Here we go. What have we got here, then?
Over into the drinks cupboard, yes. And, of course, the favourite tipple of Her Majesty and the Queen Mother, of gin and Dubonnet, they like to take around 6 o'clock in the evenings. The Queen Mother was dying for a drink one afternoon. She had 2 members of her own staff on board, 2 male gentlemen, that were having a tiff out the back.
What, just
out the back of here. So she opened the door and said, "Could you 2 queens stop having a fallout? Because this old queen would like a drink, please." And in they would come to serve her drink.
The tales of everyday life on board Britannia made entertaining gossip for the papers. But in recession-hit 80s Britain, they began to grate, both for the public and the tabloids. Coming up, the backlash when taxpayers discovered how much it was all costing them.
There was horror. People said, why doesn't the Queen pay for one? If she wants a yacht, let her pay for it herself.
From the beginning, Britannia polarised opinion. Loved by the royals, but loathed by others who viewed it as an expensive extravagance. It certainly gave the Queen and her family a comfortable lifestyle when travelling. Today, I'm being given a unique insight into what life on board was like for them.
This is where we'd come back and serve coffee into the drawing sitting room. They would relax in here after functions. Of course, Diana would play on the piano in the corner here that we have.
Diana was a fan of...
She really did like to play on the piano, yes, when she was on board. But this would be where they relax and have fun as a family. No members of the crew would be around while they're in here.
Britannia's royal passengers may not have mingled with crew in the sitting room, but ex-yachty Harry Horn remembers plenty of occasions when they did in other parts of the ship.
We would be given fair warning that one of the royal family would be coming for it, or indeed all of them.
But you experienced that, Dave?
I did many times. I was sat on my funnel siren waiting for Rear Admiral Woodard to appear, and he had Prince Charles in tow, and promptly called me over and we sat there and had a little chat. I've also sat with Princess Anne up forward. There was a lovely story of Diana going forward unannounced into the unwinding room, which she called the smoky little room forward. And she got in there and she wouldn't leave. I wasn't on board at that time, but I do believe the Prince was summoned to ask her to go.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah, they all broke protocol at times. This was the one place that all of the royals said they felt most relaxed, especially Her Majesty. It was the one place she knew there was only one camera going to be out at any one time. It was their private residence, and nobody was looking.
Back with Royal Steward William French, and we've reached the room where lunches and dinners always occurred, whether for visiting dignitaries or just the family.
This is the Royal Stateroom banqueting where we would take all meals on board. This is also quite a special room because the children wouldn't be allowed into this room until they knew the etiquette of how to sit at the table properly and eat correctly. Her Majesty would sit at the top of the table, always at the head of the table.
Up this end?
Yes. So, of course, we also had the secret bell, Rob, underneath the table by Her Majesty.
Oh, well, that's a bell to the crew
to the
say,
crew.
Right.
Yes, to move it along. Let's speed this up.
Very shrewd. Very good. I like that.
We've now got where the cinema would take place on board.
So it'd be hidden away in here?
Hidden away behind this bulkhead. 35mm film would be controlled by the stewards the other side, and we'd open this door and project down to the room onto a big screen. The royal family and their members would be sitting here. They loved 70s Bonds movies and...
But a few spy films, that kind of thing,
films.
a bit of action.
Yes.
In 1986, Britannia had its own starring role in a real-life action adventure that could have been a Hollywood blockbuster. The setting was South Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula. A brutal and unexpected uprising left thousands of foreign nationals, including Britons, stranded in the capital, Aden. Jeremy Flaxman, who's now making an emotional return to Britannia, was in the country on business and trapped inside his hotel.
We started to see, is it safe to be in our rooms? We looked out, realised it wasn't because small arms fire was coming, and then the rocket grenade hit my balcony wall and blew the curtains in and blew the room up, basically, that one there.
So this is your room, and that's just on your balcony?
Yeah. I'd literally just walked out the door to say down to my colleagues, this is blowing up, like, this is really serious. So we decided to go around to the central lift shaft area, and everyone was congregating around the central lifts because it was the strongest point with the most protection.
Felt like a safe place for everyone.
From concrete, yeah, rather than open windows. And that became our home for the week. That's where we lived for a week.
Stuck in the middle of ferocious fighting, Jeremy and the other guests grew increasingly worried they wouldn't get out alive. But then came hopeful, if unlikely, news.
It wasn't until Thursday, I think, that we heard that this rather bizarre story coming from a telephone conversation with the embassy that the Royal Yacht Britannia was going to stop by and pick us up.
What?
And we're like...
What did that feel like, receiving that message?
That was nonsense. I mean, it's just nonsense, just a fairy story. Doesn't, you know, Royal Yacht Britannia. Yeah, really.
But it was true. As a non-combat rescue vessel, Britannia had been allowed to sail to an evacuation point off the coast near Aden. Rear Admiral Sir John Garnier was her commander at the time.
We arrived off Aden the next morning. There was fierce fighting going on in Aden itself, so it was not a good place to be.
With fighting continuing, hundreds of foreign nationals faced a treacherous journey to the beach, Britannia, and safety.
We walked out and I had a broomstick and a white flag, and as we're walking around to the embassy, dawn is rising now, so you're starting to see a bit of daylight, hazy light, and you could then the horror is evident everywhere. Lying on the ground, bodies that had been there, some of them a week. Pretty horrific, pretty horrific. So then we got to the embassy, and the embassy had one Land Rover with a big Union Jack on the top.
And the guy there was extremely brave. He was running convoys of groups down to the beach.
By this time, the beach was being held by rebel fighters who were refusing to release the desperate foreign nationals. It took the ingenuity of Britannia's beachmaster, Lieutenant Robert Eason, to save them.
Lieutenant Eason negotiated with Mars bars and biscuits and cigarettes with the people there who weren't actually very keen to release them. But
to allow the evacuees to actually leave.
That's right, but he persuaded them.
When the evacuees made it to the beach, there was no time to waste.
An English guy in his safari whites, striding ashore, will take you out to the launch and then we'll get you aboard Britannia. Of course, we're delighted, thank you very much. And that was it. We got out to Britannia. It was a lovely sunny day and the fighting had started and the tanks were coming up the beach and it was all breaking down and we had to leave after getting as many people on board as we could. The Royal Yacht Britannia saved my life and hundreds of others.
Packed full of evacuees, the Royal Yacht had to adapt very quickly to its new role.
We're into the state dining room here. Quite different, I imagine, now to how it was when you first came aboard.
Yes, there was none of the formal setting for breakfast or dinner. There were no tables or chairs or furniture.
All of this had been shipped out.
They put a huge tarpaulin down. There must have been 100, 150 Indians and Chinese who turned it into a Chinese laundry. I was nosy. I said, can I go and have a look at the engine room? And on the way down through, the crew members showed me some Indians that were sleeping on the Queen's bed.
Really? So
and they'd left. They decided to leave them there rather than make a fuss because they were tired. And I said, do you think the Queen will mind? He said, I don't think we'll tell her.
That evening, Britannia made it to nearby Djibouti, where her passengers arrived in some style.
Britannia at night is magical, and she was lit up. She had all her flags and bunting and lights all lit up. And the Royal Yacht steamed into a prior berth with the Royal Marine Band playing Rule Britannia and God Save the Queen on, I mean, makes the flesh tingle.
And did it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It does now. It's like very emotional.
Over the course of 3 days, the Royal Yacht and her crew saved the lives of 1,082 people at Aden. As a result, Britannia's beachmaster, Lieutenant Robert Eason, received the Queen's Commendation for bravery. During her lifetime, Britannia called in at 600 ports in 135 countries. The Queen herself rarely went on the longest journeys, preferring to join at the host country. But the whole crew, including commanders like Rear Admiral Sir John Garnier, were busy throughout.
On every passage before Her Majesty arrived on board, the yacht would be scrubbed and tidied up and cleaned up, so it was immaculate.
Would there be a certain buzz and excitement among crew members, and including yourself, in anticipation for her arrival?
Oh, absolutely, no. That was our purpose. We had a policy of unobtrusive excellence, and everybody was dedicated to doing that.
The galley, or kitchen, like everywhere else on Britannia, was expected to produce first-class results every time, including for all the 968 state banquets held on board. Jeff Hughes worked in the kitchens for over 10 years.
We're in what was the Royal Galley.
So when the Royals were on board, how many people might you be catering for?
Anything in between a dozen and 250, 300.
That big a difference?
That big a difference, yeah. So it was a lot of people to cater for in a small area.
Well, right, so how many cooks would there have been in here in the Royal Galley?
Well, when you were on royal duty, the royal chefs would be on. There'd be approximately 4, maybe 5 royal chefs.
I imagine maybe a state banquet with, what, 56 people sat next door waiting to be served. Yeah. That must have been the most stressful, the most hard work, wasn't it, to cater for?
It was stressful to the point of making sure everything was perfect coming out. The head chef would check everything, try it.
Every single dish before it goes out?
Every single dish before going out, to make sure it was perfect.
So what are we looking at here, Jeff? These are some interesting-looking documents.
Yeah, well, these are just a selection of some of the menus from different parts of the world that were done for Her Majesty the Queen's meal in the Royal Dining Room. These were some of the chefs I worked with during my time on the yacht. And I've worked with quite a few, but this was a group at the time.
This other photo here, you've got Her Royal Highness and Prince Philip mucking in a bit here as well.
Yeah, this is a ceremonial stirring of the Christmas pudding mix. If we were on royal duty when Her Majesty the Queen was on board and it was time for mixing the Christmas puddings, they would come in the ship's galley and ceremonially stir the Christmas pudding, put the rum and the booze in, and that paddle there was only ever used for stirring the Christmas pudding. It was never used for anything else.
And then who's this handsome young chap?
Oh, that's me.
Over the Queen's shoulder there.
That's me looking over Her Majesty's shoulder.
Just keeping an eye on making sure the mix is right.
It was all going in, yeah.
The banquets, the journeys and the staffing of Britannia didn't come cheap though. During questioning by MPs, it was revealed that the running costs were £10 million a year. For many taxpayers who'd lived through a series of recessions, it was hard to stomach.
It's a fun-loving gin palace in that way. That's what people thought. People said, why doesn't the Queen pay for one? If she wants a yacht, let her pay for it herself.
But Britannia's supporters pointed to the valuable role she played in boosting British exports. On one trip to India alone in 1992, deals worth £3 billion were signed. Every state visit ended with so-called sea days, where foreign captains of industry were invited on board.
They really are amazing. Let me tell you about one. Was in Los Angeles. He was the head of the Boeing Aircraft Corporation, and also there was the head of Rolls-Royce in America. Now, they shook hands, and I was told later that getting together, they'd signed a contract for $200 million.
And that was on board Britannia?
On board. And I spoke to Mr. Boeing, and I said, what persuaded you to come to this little cocktail party? And he said, my wife came in to see me, and she saw this little piece of pasteboard on my desk, and she picked it up, and it said, the captain of the Royal Yacht is commanded by Her Majesty. And she stopped there. She said, we are going to that. I think it's fair to say it more than earned its money about 100 times over during its lifetime.
As Britannia reached her 40s, the questions surrounding her role and running costs intensified. What nobody knew then, and what many don't know even now, was that she was also being held in reserve for a top-secret role. Coming up, the declassified documents that reveal all. For much of her lifetime, the Royal Yacht Britannia was at the centre of controversy, often labelled an extravagant pleasure cruiser. But she was always much more than that.
We know she'd been designed to function as a hospital ship, and although she never fully converted, she proved her worth in 1986, evacuating British and foreign nationals from Aden under fire.
Her most surprising role was a heavily guarded secret that only came to light once she was decommissioned.
And just in here is the ship's communication centre. Look at this. This is fantastic. This is a real step back in time. Now, today, a lot of the more sensitive, classified equipment has been stripped out, you can see. But there's still a lot of original equipment. And this is where all the encrypted messages were sent to Her Majesty on board, and in turn, where the Queen's messages and responses were sent from. But Britannia had a much more important role than just regular royal communication.
In In the last 10 years, secret documents concerning Britannia have come to light, and what they reveal is almost unbelievable.
In the 1950s and 60s, at the height of the Cold War, nuclear Armageddon was considered a real possibility. The Ministry of Defence had to come up with an emergency plan in case the unthinkable happened. These documents, which have since been declassified, detail that plan, which would come to be known as Python.
It's common knowledge that in the event of nuclear war, Britannia would be a floating bunker for the royal family. But these documents, never made public before now, show that Britannia would have had a much more important function.
Python sets out 5 top-secret locations which would become the central government war headquarters should government in London be completely wiped out by a nuclear attack. Crucially, these documents state that Her Majesty's yacht Britannia was one of those 5 locations. Each of those locations would be given the authority of central government, including control of Polaris, the UK's nuclear defence system.
So the royal yacht, often derided as an expensive indulgence, would in fact have been one of the last lines of the UK's defences, playing a crucial role in preserving British identity. Thankfully, the nuclear Armageddon that was envisioned and planned for during the Cold War never came about. By the mid-90s, Britannia's primary role was coming to an end. The wrong side of 40, she was showing her age and proving expensive to maintain. And in a country emerging from a deep economic recession, the idea of a replacement didn't go down well.
Horror. Nobody wanted it, or very, very few people wanted it replaced at that time. Britannia had sailed over 1 million nautical miles and visited something like 157 different countries, I believe, somewhere around about there. And I remember in Parliament, the question was raised about perhaps having a new royal yacht for the Queen. That was the problem. They used the word yacht, you see, and in the public's eye and in the public's mind, the word yacht was equal to luxury and ostentation, you know, and, whereas the Queen regarded it very much as one of her working homes, the working palace afloat, if you like, in that way. It was bad public relations all around.
In what was perhaps one of the hardest decisions of the Queen's reign, Britannia was to be decommissioned. Her last official duty was to attend Britain's handover of Hong Kong in June 1997. One of the last outposts of the Empire. One final glittering hurrah. In December that year, during Britannia's decommissioning ceremony at Portsmouth, the normally reserved Queen let her feelings show.
I saw her cry on that one day at the decommissioning paying off ceremony of Her Majesty's Yacht Britannia in Portsmouth, and in 1997. It was a very windy day, but we saw some tears coming out of her eyes, I think. I looked at Prince Philip at the same time, and I thought he blinked rather heavily.
The royal yacht's sailing days are now well behind her. She may have courted controversy, but for over 44 years she served the royal family, travelling over 1 million miles to become the most famous ship in the world. To Her Majesty the Queen, Britannia proved to be the perfect royal residence for glittering state visits, official receptions, royal honeymoons, and relaxing family holidays. For Great Britain, she was a majestic symbol of the Commonwealth and a proud ambassador. For the royal family and dedicated crew of yachties, she was home. Now permanently berthed in Edinburgh, she's the most popular visitor attraction in Scotland. But Britannia remains undoubtedly one of the most famous vessels in our maritime past.
She's a wonderful survivor and a grand testament to British engineering. But she's more than that. She's a living record of early 20th century British and royal social history, and quite literally the benchmark in super yachts.